There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes that dignity is not something the world grants you. It is something you must claim for yourself. And I learned this lesson in the cruelest classroom imaginable, a Siberian prison camp where respect was currency and weakness was death. What I discovered there, what I paid for with years of chains and suffering, what I saw in the eyes of murderers and thieves and men who had nothing left to lose, these lessons shaped everything I would later write about human nature, about power, about the terrible beauty of maintaining your humanity when the world is trying to strip it away. This is not philosophy for comfortable people. This is not wisdom gained from books or theories or the safety of academic halls. This is knowledge earned in blood and cold, and the daily humiliation of being treated as less than human. And what I'm about to share with you are 7 ways to handle disrespect, 7 principles forged in fire, 7 truths that kept me whole when everything around me was designed to break me. By the time you finish listening to this, you will understand something that most people never learn, that respect is not about what others give you, it's about what you refuse to surrender, and the man who knows this, who truly grasps this in his bones, becomes untouchable not because he's invincible, but because he's discovered something that cannot be taken away. Listen carefully, because these lessons cost me everything to learn, and I'm offering them to you across the centuries in the hope that you won't have to pay the same price I paid to understand what it means to stand with dignity in a world that offers you none. First way, master the silence that terrifies. When I stood before that firing squad at 28 years old, when the soldiers raised their rifles and I had seconds left to live, when every instinct screamed to beg or plead or cry out for mercy, I said nothing, and in that silence I discovered something more powerful than any words could ever be, because silence in the face of your executioners is not weakness, it's the ultimate statement of sovereignty. It says you will not give them the satisfaction of your fear, you will not hand them power. Over your final moments, you will stand as a man even when they're trying to reduce you to a begging animal. They stopped the execution at the last second. It was theater, psychological torture, a demonstration of the Tsar's power. But what they didn't know was that in those final moments of silence I had already won, because I had refused to break, had refused to give them what they wanted, had maintained my humanity in the face of annihilation. And this lesson, this understanding of what silence can do, stayed with me through 4 years in Siberia, where disrespect was constant, was casual, was woven into every moment of every day. The guards would insult you, would call you names, would spit contempt with every word, and the prisoners who survived were not the ones who fought back against every insult, not the ones who defended their honor with fists or words. They were the ones who understood that silence is not submission. Silence is strategy. Silence is the refusal to engage in a game where your enemy holds all the cards. When someone disrespects you, they are trying to get a reaction. They are fishing for your energy, your attention, your emotional response, because that response proves they have power over you, proves they can move you, proves they matter in your world. But when you meet disrespect with silence, with a look that says you barely registered their existence, with a stillness that suggests they are so far beneath you that their words are just noise, something shifts in the dynamic, because now they're the ones who feel uncertain, now they're the ones wondering if they made a mistake, now they're the ones desperate for some reaction to confirm that they had an impact. Your silence becomes their torture, and this is not the silence of a man who doesn't know what to say. This is the silence of a man who knows that some people are not worth the breath it would take to respond to them. I watched this play out hundreds of times in prison. The prisoners who maintained their dignity were the ones who didn't react to every provocation, who didn't waste their energy on petty conflicts, who understood that in a world designed to dehumanize you, the ultimate rebellion is to remain calm, to remain quiet, to remain unmoved by those who want nothing more than to see you break. Practice this the next time someone attempts to disrespect you. Say nothing, watch what happens, watch them escalate, watch them become more desperate, watch them reveal themselves while you remain a mystery, and understand that in that moment your silence is teaching them something they will never forget, that you are not a man who can be moved by their opinion, and that is the most powerful position you could ever hold. Second way, remove them from your world completely. In Siberia, you learned quickly that your life depended on who you allowed close to you, because in a place where violence was constant and trust was rare, the wrong association could get you killed. The wrong friendship could drag you into conflicts that weren't yours. The wrong alliance could mark you for destruction. So you became selective, brutally selective, and the men who showed you disrespect, who demonstrated they didn't value your existence, who treated you as something less than human, those men were cut off immediately, totally, without hesitation. This was not emotion. This was survival, because every moment you spent with someone who didn't respect you was a moment wasted, was energy drained, was a weakness your enemies could exploit, and in that environment weakness meant death. What I learned there applies just as much to life outside those walls. Your presence in someone's life is not a right they possess, it's a privilege you grant, and the moment they demonstrate they don't value that privilege, the moment they treat you with disrespect, they have forfeited access to you, permanently, without appeal, without second chances. Most people fail at this because they fear being alone. They fear the discomfort of cutting someone out. They fear being seen as cold or harsh or unforgiving. But let me tell you what I learned watching men die in that frozen hell. Being alone is better than being surrounded by people who degrade you. Isolation chosen is better than connection that destroys your soul. And the man who can walk away from anyone who disrespects him is the man who will eventually be surrounded only by those who value him. This is not cruelty. This is standards. This is self-respect in action. This is the understanding that your world is a kingdom and you are the one who decides who enters and who is exiled. When someone disrespects you and you continue to allow them access to your time, your energy, your presence, you are teaching them that disrespect works, that boundaries don't exist, that they can treat you however they want without consequence. But when you remove them completely, when you cut them off without explanation or drama or negotiation, you send a message that reverberates through your entire social world. You are not a man who tolerates disrespect. You are not a man who gives infinite chances. You are a man with standards, and those standards are enforced without mercy. Do not announce this. Do not make speeches about it. Do not explain yourself or justify your decision. Simply vanish from their life like you were never there. Block them, delete them, remove every trace of connection, and move forward as if they never existed. Because the truth is, the moment they chose to disrespect you, they chose to remove themselves from your world. You're just making their choice official. Your absence will teach them what your presence never could, that you were something valuable they lost, that access to you is worth protecting, that they made a mistake they cannot undo, and that lesson will follow them long after you've forgotten they exist. Third way, let your life become the answer. The greatest revenge I ever took against those who humiliated me in prison, against those who treated me as worthless, against those who enjoyed watching me suffer, was not through confrontation or violence or any direct action against them. It was through becoming someone they could never diminish, through building a life so meaningful that their opinions became irrelevant, through achieving things they couldn't comprehend and certainly couldn't touch. While I was in chains, I could have spent my energy plotting revenge, fantasizing about what I would do to those who degraded me, nursing grudges that would have poisoned my soul, but I made a different choice. I decided that every moment of suffering, every insult absorbed, every humiliation endured would become fuel for something greater, would transform into understanding, into depth, into the material I would later use to create works that would outlive everyone in that prison, guards and prisoners alike. This is what people don't understand about elevation. It's not about proving your enemies wrong. It's about making them irrelevant. It's about climbing so high that you can't even remember their names. It's about building something so significant that the disrespect you once endured becomes a footnote in a story of triumph. Every time someone disrespects you, they are giving you a gift whether they know it or not. They are showing you that your current position is not secure, that you need to rise, that you cannot afford to be comfortable where you are, because if you were truly elevated, if you were truly unreachable, their disrespect would never have landed in the first place. Use that gift. Let their contempt become the fire that drives you to wake up earlier, work harder, learn more, build better, create something they could never imagine. And here's what happens when you do this. When you take the energy of being disrespected and channel it entirely into your own elevation, you don't just surpass them, you enter a different realm entirely. They stay where they are, stuck in the same small world where they feel powerful by diminishing others, while you ascend to heights where their opinions are just distant echoes you barely register. And the beautiful thing is you don't need to tell them about your success. You don't need to rub their faces in it. You don't need to send them updates on your progress, because success has a way of spreading. Achievement has a way of being known, and eventually they will hear about what you've become. They will see your name, they will witness your rise, and they will remember the day they chose to disrespect you. And in that moment they will understand that they were not dealing with someone weak. They were dealing with someone who was storing energy, gathering fuel, preparing for a transformation they couldn't possibly understand. The revenge is not in their suffering. The revenge is in your absolute indifference to whether they suffer or not, because you've moved so far beyond where you were that their existence doesn't register in your world anymore. They become less than a memory, less than a thought, less than the dust on the floor, and that is the ultimate power, to rise so high that your enemies become invisible from where you stand. Fourth way, let time reveal their nature to everyone. In prison I learned to watch, to observe, to study human nature in its rawest form, because they're stripped of all social pretense, of all masks and performances. People revealed who they truly were, and what I noticed was this: the men who were quick to disrespect others, who made their power known through humiliation, who built themselves up by tearing others down, those men inevitably destroyed themselves, not through any action I took, not through some cosmic justice, but through the simple mathematics of their own character. A man who disrespects one person will disrespect others. A man who builds his identity on dominance will eventually overreach. A man driven by ego and insecurity will make enemies faster than he can count them, and eventually those enemies accumulate, those bridges burn, pile up, and the destruction comes not from external attack, but from internal collapse. This was true in Siberia, and it's true everywhere. The person who disrespected you has revealed their character, and that character is a crack in their foundation, and given enough time, enough situations, enough interactions, that crack will spread until everything they built comes crashing down. Your job is not to accelerate this process. Your job is not to attack them, or expose them, or campaign against them. Your job is simply to step back, to remove yourself from their trajectory, and to watch as they do to themselves what you could never do to them. This requires patience, requires the understanding that justice is not always immediate, that karma operates on timelines we don't control, that the universe has a way of balancing accounts that doesn't require your intervention, and the man who understands this, who can wait, who can trust the process, he is the one who ends up vindicated without ever lifting a finger. But there's a more active element to this as well. You can position yourself in ways that allow their true nature to emerge faster, not through manipulation exactly, but through creating situations where their mask slips, where their behavior is visible to others, where the contrast between your composure and their pettiness becomes undeniable. When you remain calm while they rage, when you maintain dignity while they descend into spite, when you speak with measure while they speak with venom, everyone watching makes a judgment, and that judgment accumulates, and eventually the verdict is delivered not by you, but by the collective observation of everyone who witnessed the pattern. I saw this happen over and over. The guards who were most cruel, most eager to humiliate prisoners, most drunk on their tiny amount of power, they were the ones who eventually fell from grace. Not because prisoners revolted, but because they made themselves hateful to everyone around them, because cruelty is addictive and it spreads, because the man who disrespects prisoners today will disrespect his fellow guards tomorrow, and eventually someone with more power notices, eventually someone with authority sees the pattern, eventually the predator becomes prey to someone higher in the hierarchy. Give your enemies enough time and they will defeat themselves. Give them enough rope and they will hang themselves. Give them enough room to operate and they will reveal to everyone what you already know, that they are small, petty, driven by insecurity, incapable of maintaining dignity under pressure. And when that revelation comes, when everyone sees what you saw from the beginning, you don't need to say a word, you don't need to point fingers, you don't need to claim victory, because the victory is complete, is undeniable, is delivered by their own hand. Fifth way, control what people remember about you. When I was released from Siberia, I could have returned to St. Petersburg as a broken man, could have worn my suffering like a badge, could have let everyone see the damage, could have become defined by what was done to me. But I made a different choice. I decided that people would remember me not for what I endured, but for what I created from that endurance, not for the chains I wore, but for the books I wrote, not for the humiliation I suffered, but for the dignity I maintained. This is the power of narrative, the understanding that history is written not by what happened, but by what people believe happened. That reputation is built not on truth alone, but on the strategic presentation of truth. That the story people tell about you is more important than the events themselves. When someone disrespects you, a story is being written. They are trying to cast you as weak, as someone who can be pushed around without consequence, as someone whose presence doesn't matter. And if you allow their version to stand, if you don't strategically shape how others perceive what occurred, you have surrendered the most important battlefield of all. This is not about lying. This is about emphasis, about making sure the truth that serves you is the truth that spreads, about ensuring that your response to disrespect is remembered more than the disrespect itself, about controlling through your actions and your composure what people will say about you when you're not in the room. How do you do this? You remain calm when they are emotional, because calmness signals strength, signals control, signals that you are operating from a position of security, while they are operating from insecurity. You speak with precision when you do speak, not defending yourself desperately but stating facts clearly and then moving on, because the man who over-explains seems guilty while the man who states truth simply seems confident. You demonstrate through your daily behavior the kind of person you are, because people trust what they see over what they hear, and when your actions contradict the narrative your enemy is pushing, their story falls apart without you having to dismantle it directly. In prison, I learned that the men who maintained their reputation were not the loudest or the most aggressive. They were the ones who were consistent, who acted with principle even when no one was watching, who demonstrated character in small moments that accumulated into an undeniable pattern. And when someone tried to spread lies about these men, when someone tried to damage their reputation through rumor or accusation, the lies didn't stick because everyone had seen with their own eyes who these men really were. This is your strategy. Build such a strong pattern of character that any attack on your reputation automatically seems false. Be so consistent in your integrity that people instinctively doubt anyone who says otherwise. Demonstrate your worth so clearly through action that words against you seem like the desperate attacks of someone who has already lost. Control the narrative not through what you say, but through who you are, because character is the ultimate form of narrative control, and the man whose character is unquestionable cannot be touched by the accusations of his enemies. Sixth way, strike where reputation lives and dies. There came a point in Siberia when silence and patience and elevation were not enough, when a threat was so direct that it required response, when a challenge was so public that walking away would have been interpreted as weakness by everyone watching. And in those moments, I learned to strike not with violence, not with anger, not with the weapons my enemies expected, but with something far more devastating, with precision that targeted what mattered most, reputation. In prison, your reputation was everything. It determined who would ally with you, who would trade with you, who would protect you, who would target you, and if your reputation was destroyed you became isolated, became vulnerable, became prey, and the men who understood this didn't fight with fists, they fought with information, with observation, with the strategic revelation of truth that demolished their enemies more completely than violence ever could. When someone disrespects you publicly, when they challenge you in front of others, when they try to diminish you in a way that demands response, you do not react emotionally. You do not meet their aggression with your aggression. You observe them carefully. You note their weaknesses. You identify the gaps in their armor. You discover what they value most. And then when the moment is right, when the ground has been prepared, you strike there. This is not about gossip. This is not about lies. This is about truth strategically deployed, about observations shared with the right people at the right time, about contrasts highlighted in ways that force everyone to see what you have already seen, that the person who disrespected you is not what they present themselves to be, that behind their confidence is insecurity, that beneath their strength is weakness, that their attacks on you are projections of their own inadequacy. How do you do this without becoming what they are? You speak truth and nothing but truth. You share observations that others can verify. You ask questions that make people think rather than telling them what to think. You position yourself as someone seeking understanding rather than attacking, and the truth does the rest, because truth is more powerful than any lie you could construct. Truth has a way of spreading that fiction never achieves. Truth resonates in ways that manipulation cannot. In prison I saw men destroyed not by physical confrontation, but by having their true nature revealed to the community. A thief who pretended to be honorable exposed by evidence of his betrayals. A bully who pretended to be strong shown to be cowardly when facing real threat. A manipulator who pretended to be clever revealed to be transparently obvious in his schemes. And once the community saw the truth, once the mask was removed and everyone understood who this person really was, there was no recovery, because reputation once destroyed is almost impossible to rebuild. This is the ultimate strike, not against their body, not against their possessions, but against the image they've constructed of themselves, against the respect they've accumulated, against the social capital they've been trading on. And when that falls, when everyone sees them as they truly are, they become isolated, become weakened, become unable to threaten you anymore because no one will stand with them, no one will believe them, no one will take their side when they come for you again. But use this weapon carefully, use it only when necessary, because the man who strikes reputations too freely, who makes it his habit to destroy others socially, becomes known for that and loses his own credibility, becomes seen as petty, becomes someone people don't trust with information because they fear he'll weaponize it against them. Strike only when you must, strike only with truth, strike only when the person has demonstrated through repeated behavior that they are a threat that must be neutralized. And when you do strike, strike so completely that you never have to strike twice. Seventh way, reach the place beyond all insult. After 4 years in chains, after countless indignities, after being treated as less than human so many times that I lost count, something shifted in me that I can barely put into words. I reached a place where insults simply stopped penetrating, where disrespect rolled off me like water off stone, where the opinions of others, even the most vicious opinions, the most cruel judgments, the most hateful words, they simply had no power anymore, because I had discovered something that changed. Everything, that my worth was not determined by external validation, that my humanity could not be taken away by how others treated me, that I possessed an internal kingdom they could never touch. This was not numbness, this was not death of feeling, this was something far more powerful. This was the understanding that I existed independent of their perception, that who I was had nothing to do with what they said about me, that my dignity was self-sourced, self-sustained, self-sufficient, and this realization, this shift in consciousness, made me untouchable in a way that no physical protection ever could. When you reach this place, when you genuinely arrive at this understanding, everything changes, because the person who insulted you is confused. They expected hurt, they expected anger, they expected some reaction that would confirm their power over you. But they get nothing. They get a look that says you barely register their existence. They get a response that suggests you weren't even really paying attention. They get the devastating experience of realizing that they have no ability to move you. This is not something you can fake. This is not an act you can perform. This is an actual internal state you must reach through work, through introspection, through the brutal examination of why you still care what others think, through the killing of the parts of yourself that need approval, through the reconstruction of your identity around values that come entirely from within. In Siberia, I had no choice but to find this place, because the alternative was to break, to shatter under the weight of constant degradation, to lose myself completely in the hell of caring what my tormentors thought of me. And the prisoners who survived with their sanity intact were the ones who made this journey, who found this inner sovereignty, who discovered that they could stand in the middle of hell and remain whole because their wholeness was not dependent on their environment. This is the final level. This is where all the previous strategies have been leading, because silence is powerful, but even more powerful is not needing to be silent because you genuinely don't care. Removing people is effective, but even more effective is not needing to remove them, because their presence or absence makes no difference to your internal state. Elevation is satisfying, but even more satisfying is not needing the elevation to prove anything, because you're already complete and all. The other strategies, all the other ways of handling disrespect, they work, they're valuable, they're tools you should master, but the ultimate destination is this place beyond all of them, where you need nothing from anyone, where you are so completely self-sufficient emotionally that the entire world could turn against you and you would remain unmoved. I watched men reach this place in prison, and when they did, something remarkable happened. Their enemies stopped targeting them, because there's no satisfaction in attacking someone who doesn't react. There's no power in insulting someone who doesn't care. There's no point in trying to break someone who cannot be broken, because they've already accepted the worst and found peace with it. These men became almost invisible to cruelty, not because they hid, but because cruelty needs vulnerability to work, needs something to latch onto, needs the hope of causing pain. And when there's nothing there, when the target is completely empty of the need for respect or approval or validation, the attack simply passes through like wind through empty space. This is what I'm offering you as the final lesson. Work toward this place, move in this direction. Understand that every time you care less about what someone thinks of you, every time you find your worth from within rather than from without, every time you discover that you're complete without their approval, you're becoming more powerful, more free, more untouchable. The man who has reached this place is beyond all strategies, beyond all tactics, beyond all games, because he stepped outside the entire system where disrespect has meaning. He exists in a different realm where insults are just noise, where opinions are just weather, where the judgments of others are as relevant to his worth as the phases of the moon. Work toward this, move toward this, understand that this is possible, that I found it in the worst conditions imaginable, which means you can find it wherever you are. And when you do, when you finally arrive at this place of complete internal sovereignty, you will understand that you were never fighting for respect. You were fighting for something far more valuable. You were fighting for freedom from needing respect. And that freedom, once found, once secured, once made permanent, is the greatest victory any man can achieve. You now hold 7 weapons forged in Siberian cold, 7 lessons paid for with suffering, 7 truths that kept me whole when the world was trying to break me. Use them wisely. Use them with understanding. Use them knowing that they come not from theory, but from the terrible education of lived experience. If this reached something deep inside you, if these words connected with something you've been feeling, write one phrase in the comments, write, "I am sovereign," and claim your own internal kingdom. Subscribe to this channel if you want more wisdom born from darkness, more truth earned through suffering, more lessons that the comfortable will never understand. Remember, respect is not given by the world. It is claimed by the man who knows his own worth. And once you know that worth, once you find it in yourself, nothing anyone says or does can ever take it away. Now go become untouchable.